I want to defend you tomorrow,
he says, with less than a day to prepare for the hearing that can erase your career. It's the night before the verdict inside the hospital. When Michael drops his bar card on the table and admits his license is still active and that he knows it's a setup. A ruined corporate lawyer, his relentless journalism student daughter, a heart surgeon framed as a killer. What they uncover is not a simple bad report, but a blueprint for character assassination that would have worked perfectly if one tiny detail in the timeline hadn't refused to make sense. This is the story of how that single inconsistency dragged a billion-dollar conspiracy into the light. The conference room at the State Medical Board of California was dead silent when the man in the faded maintenance coverall stood up, ignoring the contemptuous stares from the physicians seated around the mahogany table. He held a worn leather folder, stained with coffee rings and creased at the edges, and his hands trembled slightly as he opened the first document. "With all due respect, doctors," he said, his voice rough but steady, "you were about to destroy an innocent woman's life based on reports that were uneven signed by the actual specialists." The board chairman, Dr. Armando Castellanos, a silver-haired man in an Italian suit, banged his gavel on the table. "Mr. Reeves, you're here as a character witness, not as an attorney. Sit down immediately or you'll be removed from this hearing." Michael Reeves didn't move. His eyes tired, but still capable of holding a steady gaze settled on each board member, one by one. "I am an attorney," Dr. Castellanos was, "and I still have an active license. And if Dr. Elena Torres has no one to defend her in this room, then I'm assuming that responsibility right now, at this very moment." A murmur rippled through the room. The accused physician, Dr. Elena Torres, a 38-year-old cardiovascular surgeon with a pale face and red-rimmed eyes from sleepless nights, stared at Michael as if seeing a ghost. No one expected the hospital maintenance tech, the man who changed light bulbs in hallways and fixed jammed doors, to be capable of forming a legal sentence, let alone mounting a defense. Michael took a deep breath and placed the folder on the table beside Elena. "So let's start from the beginning," he said, opening the first medical report. "Because what's happening here isn't justice. It's a lynching. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever walked past someone who, years before, you deeply admired and realized that person didn't even remember your face? Leave in the comments where you're rewatching from and tell me, do you believe an ordinary person can take on an entire system and win? If you believe in stories of courage, of people like us doing extraordinary things, then subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Because what you're about to hear is about a man who lost everything, was forgotten by the world, but found strength exactly where no one expected, in the silence of hospital corridors. Now let's go back to the beginning. Michael Anthony Reeves was 52 years old and woke up every day at 4:30 in the morning. He lived in a 2-room apartment in East Los Angeles, in a building with no elevator where the paint peeled and the intercom never worked. His uniform navy blue pants and a denim shirt with the Riverside Medical Center logo embroidered on the chest was always clean, but the colors had faded after so many washings. He worked the graveyard shift from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., handling general maintenance, burned out lights, leaks, jammed locks, broken air conditioning. He did everything quietly with almost invisible efficiency. Nurses greeted him with a distracted wave. Doctors rarely saw him. To most people, Michael was just part of the structure, like the walls or the ventilation system. But it hadn't always been that way. 12 years earlier, Michael Reeves had been one of the most promising attorneys at Whitfield, Chun and Associates, one of the largest firms in California specializing in corporate and regulatory law. He defended pharmaceutical companies, private hospitals, health insurance providers. He made good money, wore custom-tailored suits, had an apartment in Santa Monica with an ocean view, Until the day he discovered that a client lab called Biovitalis was falsifying clinical trials to approve a cardiac drug that caused severe side effects in patients with a history of renal insufficiency. Michael took the information to the firm's partners, expecting them to report the scheme. Instead, he was fired that same week. Worse, forged documents surfaced proving that Michael had accepted bribes to cover up irregularities for another client. The state bar opened disciplinary proceedings. He was suspended for 2 years. When he returned, no one would hire him. His wife, Renata, filed for divorce and took their daughter, Sophie, then 9 years old, to Portland. Michael lost everything. And when his license was reinstated, he no longer had the strength to try again. He accepted a job as a maintenance tech at Riverside Medical Center because he needed to eat. And he stayed 12 years. But he never canceled his state bar registration. He paid the annual dues religiously, maybe out of stubbornness, maybe out of hope, or maybe because that red and white card was the last thing connecting him to the person he used to be. Dr. Elena Torres was different from most doctors at Riverside Medical Center. She greeted Michael by name, asked how he was doing. Once, when he was fixing the women's bathroom sink in the surgical wing, she stopped to chat and mentioned that she admired people who did manual work with dedication, because the world only works when every piece does its part right. Michael never forgot that. Elena was a brilliant cardiovascular surgeon. Trained at Johns Hopkins, fellowship at Mayo Clinic, returned to California to work in the public system. She could have been making a fortune at private clinics, but she chose Riverside, a public county hospital, because she believed everyone deserved access to cutting-edge surgery, not just those who could afford it. She was respected, beloved, and incredibly competent. Until one Tuesday morning, 3 months before the board hearing, when everything collapsed. A patient named Arthur Mills, a 61-year-old business owner, died on the operating table during a coronary bypass procedure performed by Elena. The family immediately accused her of medical negligence. The press picked up the case. Sensational headlines began circulating. Public hospital doctor kills businessman in botched surgery. Family demands justice after preventable death. The State Medical Board of California opened an investigation. Elena was suspended from her duties pending the inquiry. And then the report surfaced. 3 renowned specialists attested that she had committed gross technical errors during the operation that could have been avoided with minimal competence. Elena swore she had followed all protocols, that the death was caused by a rare and unpredictable complication. But no one believed her. Her attorney, a young, inexperienced lawyer assigned by the union, could barely mount a coherent defense. And then, the night before the final board hearing, the attorney simply disappeared, stopped taking calls. The union said he'd resigned for personal reasons. Elena was alone. That's when Michael, who had been quietly observing everything for months, made his decision. That morning, as he pushed his tool cart down the 4th-floor corridor, Michael stopped at the door of the small office where Elena sat staring at the wall. She didn't even notice when he entered. "Dr. Torres," she looked up, surprised. "Michael, hi. Can I talk to you for a minute?" Elena made a vague gesture. "Sure. I don't have anything else to do anyway." Michael pulled up a chair and sat across from her. He took his state bar card from his pocket and placed it on the desk. Elena frowned, picked up the card, looked at the photo, read the name. She slowly raised her eyes to him. "You single quotes, a lawyer?" "Was, still am, technically. Active license. Michael, I don't understand." He took a deep breath. "Doctor, I've seen everything that's happened. I know you didn't do anything wrong. And I know someone's setting this whole thing up." Elena shook her head, exhausted. "Michael, I appreciate it, but I want to defend you tomorrow." Silence. Elena stared at him for a long moment. then let out a short, bitter laugh. Are you serious? Completely. Michael, I can't ask that of you. You? You fix plumbing. You haven't practiced law in years. And even if you had, there's no way to prepare a defense in less than 24 hours. Michael opened the folder he'd brought. Inside were copies of the reports, handwritten notes, printouts of medical articles, detailed timelines. I've been studying this case for 2 months, Doctor, every night after work. And I've found things no one else has seen. Elena picked up one of the pages. Her eyes scanned the notes, diagrams, protocol comparisons, timestamps from medical records. My God, she murmured. You ... How did you get all this? I'm invisible here, Doctor. Nobody notices when I walk into a room. Nobody cares what I read or hear. Elena looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, there was something besides despair in her eyes. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you do this for me? Michael held her gaze. Because I know what it's like to be destroyed by a corrupt system. And because you're one of the few people in this hospital who treats me like a human being. The board hearing began at 9 a.m. in a large room with marble floors and wood-paneled walls. There were 8 board members, all men, all wearing dark suits. Arthur Mills's family was present, accompanied by 2 attorneys from an elite firm. The press was barred from entering, but journalists waited outside. When Michael entered with Elena, the murmuring was immediate. He wore the only outfit he still had from when he was a lawyer, a faded navy suit, white shirt without a tie, scuffed but polished shoes. Elena wore a simple, modest dress. Dr. Castellanos, the board chairman, looked at Michael with barely disguised contempt. Who are you? Michael Anthony Reeves, State Bar number 87432, counsel for Dr. Elena Torres. One of the Mills family attorneys, a middle-aged man named Mr. Quinlan, let out a laugh. Chairman, this is a joke, right? This man works as a janitor at this hospital. Maintenance technician, Michael corrected calmly, and attorney. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Dr. Castellanos checked Michael's credentials. Everything was in order. He sighed, annoyed. Very well, Mr. Reeves, but I warn you, this is a serious hearing. I won't tolerate amateurism. Understood. And then it began. The family's attorneys presented first. They displayed the 3 specialists' reports, showed photographs from the surgical procedure, pointing out supposed technical errors, brought statements from nurses claiming Elena seemed nervous and unsure during the surgery. They built an impeccable narrative of medical negligence. When they finished, Dr. Castellanos turned to Michael. Defense, do you have anything to say? Michael stood up. He walked to the table where the reports lay, picked up the first one. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have quite a bit to say. Starting with the fact that these reports are fraudulent. Shocked silence. Mr. Quinlan immediately stood. That's an extremely serious and baseless accusation. Michael turned to him, impassive. Baseless? Then explain to me why Dr. Robert Aguilar, whose name appears signing this report, was in Berlin attending a cardiology conference on the exact day he supposedly analyzed Dr. Torres's case. He threw a document onto the table. Boarding pass, conference registration, photos posted on the doctor's own social media. Quinlan's face went pale. Michael picked up the second report. And Dr. Marcus Fontaine, who signed this one, had his medical license suspended 6 months ago for fraud in expert witness reports in New York. He's not even allowed to issue technical opinions at this time. Another document on the table. And as for the third report, Michael continued, picking up the last page, signed by Dr. Henry Sanders. Well, this one's interesting, because Dr. Sanders is medical director of CompMed USA, one of the largest health insurance providers in the country. And CompMed USA coincidentally, is a subsidiary of HoldMed Group, which in turn is controlled by ... double quotes. He paused dramatically ... double quotes. BioVitalis Pharma. Elena's eyes widened. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Quinlan was pale. Michael continued, his voice now firmer, stronger. BioVitalis is one of the largest cardiovascular drug manufacturers in the United States. And 3 years ago, Dr. Elena Torres published a scientific paper reporting that one of the company's main medications, Cardiomax, presented serious risks when used in patients with a history of diabetes, exactly the profile of Mr. Arthur Mills. He picked up a printed copy of the scientific article and placed it on the table. The article generated a lawsuit. BioVitalis was ordered to pay damages. The drug was pulled from the market for 6 months for reformulation. The company lost billions. Michael looked directly at the board chairman. And now, 3 years later, Dr. Torres is being accused of killing a patient, based on fraudulent reports, signed by doctors connected to the same company she exposed. Dr. Castellanos cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Reeves, these are very serious accusations. Do you have proof of a conspiracy? Michael nodded. I do, and I'm going to present them now. In the days leading up to the hearing, Michael wasn't alone. He'd asked for help from his daughter, Sophie Reeves, now 21, an investigative journalism student at UCLA. She'd inherited her father's stubbornness and an impressive ability to dig through public records, corporate databases, and social media. Sophie came back to LA to help. She moved into her father's tiny apartment and spent 3 weeks following the money. She discovered that the Mills family, specifically Arthur's eldest son, Ryan Mills, was a minority partner in an investment firm called Prism Capital. Prism, in turn, was an investor in HoldMed Group. She discovered that Elena's previous attorney, who mysteriously disappeared, had received a deposit of $80,000 from an offshore account 3 days before abandoning the case. And she discovered something even more disturbing. In Riverside Medical Center's records, someone had digitally altered the notes from Arthur Mills's surgery. The modifications were subtle, but Sophie, with help from a digital forensics professor, managed to recover the original files. The true notes showed that Elena had followed all protocols, that the entire team had worked flawlessly, and that Arthur's death was caused by a sudden, unpredictable cardiac arrhythmia impossible to prevent. Michael presented everything to the board: the financial spreadsheets, the transfer records, the recovered files, the connections between BioVitalis, HoldMed, the Mills family, and the doctors who signed the reports. When he finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Mr. Quinlan tried to argue, but his voice was shaky, his hands sweating. Chairman, this is speculation, coincidences. There's no concrete proof that... Yes, there is, Michael interrupted, and then he played his final card. He picked up a flash drive and handed it to the board chairman. Inside this device is an audio recording. Ryan Mills and Dr. Henry Sanders discussing how to neutralize Dr. Torres, how to use his father's death to solve an old problem, how to buy reports and bribe the defense attorney. Elena put her hand to her mouth, shocked. The board members looked at each other, stunned. Dr. Castellanos inserted the flash drive into a laptop and pressed play. Ryan Mills's rough voice echoed through the room. She ruined the company, cost us billions. Now it's our turn. We use my father, make her look incompetent. Destroy her career? Simple. And Henry Sanders's voice. I already have the reports ready. We just need the lawyer to disappear at the right time. When the recording ended, Mr. Quinlan was already on his feet, hastily gathering his papers. Chairman, I had no knowledge of any of this. My client hired me. Get out, Dr. Castellanos said coldly. Now, Quinlan ran out of the room, followed by everyone's stares. The board chairman looked at Michael with an expression mixing respect and amazement. "Mr. Reeves, how did you obtain this recording?" Michael allowed himself a half smile. "Let's just say invisibility has its advantages, sir. But the victory at the hearing was only the beginning. Because HoldMed Group and BioVitalis weren't companies that accepted defeat easily." 2 days later, Michael's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but everything was ransacked. Drawers opened, papers scattered. The message was clear. "We know where you live." Sophie, who was in the apartment at the time, called the police. But when the officers arrived, they just filed a report and said it was probably an attempted burglary. Michael knew better. 3 days later, Sophie was followed leaving campus. A dark car, tinted windows, followed her for 6 blocks before disappearing. She came home shaking. And then Elena was approached in the hospital parking lot by 2 men in suits who just wanted to talk. They didn't make direct threats, but made it clear that it would be better for everyone if she stopped making noise and accepted a quiet settlement to close the case. Elena refused. That's when they got the call. It was late at night. Michael and Sophie were in the apartment, reviewing new documents Sophie had obtained. Elena's phone rang. She answered, put it on speaker. The voice on the other end was female, trembling, terrified. "Dr. Torres? It's Carla. Carla Montero." Elena frowned. "Carla? Carla from HoldMed Administration?" "Yes, I can't take this anymore. I need to talk to you. In person. Now. Carla, it's 11 at night. I know. But I need to tell you everything. About the plan. About what they're going to do. Please." Elena looked at Michael. He nodded. "Where are you?" "Echo Park Lake, near the boathouse, alone. Please come quick. I'm afraid they'll find out I'm calling." They took Elena's car, a 2015 Silver Civic with a dent in the rear door, and drove to the lake. It was a cold night, with few people on the streets. Carla was sitting on a bench, alone, clutching a large leather bag. When she saw Elena, she stood up quickly. She was a woman of about 35, thin, with red eyes from crying. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice choked. "Carla, what's going on?" Carla looked around, nervous. I've worked in HoldMed's finance department for 4 years. I always knew the company did ... questionable things. But I never imagined it would come to this." She opened her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "This has everything. Money transfers, contracts with law firms to buy cases, emails between BioVitalis executives and HoldMed, directors planning to neutralize doctors who report irregularities." Elena took the flash drive, stunned. "Carla, why are you doing this?" Carla began to cry. "Because I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I can't sleep any more knowing I work for people who destroy innocent lives. But there's more." She took a deep breath, trembling. "They know you're investigating, and they're planning to eliminate the problem. Permanently." Michael stepped forward. "Eliminate how?" Carla looked at him, her eyes overflowing with fear. "I overheard a conversation between Henry Sanders and a man I'd never seen. They talked about a car accident, about solving it before it reaches the FBI. Elena went pale. "They're going to try to kill us?" "I don't know. I just know you're not safe. And neither am I. I'm leaving the country tomorrow, going to Canada to stay with my sister. But before I go, I had to give you this." She extended the flash drive once more. Elena took it, her hands trembling. "Carla, you need to report this officially." "I will. From Canada, with a lawyer there. But right now, you need to get out of here, immediately." Carla turned and started walking quickly toward a waiting taxi. Before getting in, she looked back one last time. "I'm sorry it took me so long," she said. And then she got in the car and disappeared into the night. Michael, Elena, and Sophie returned to the car in silence. As soon as Elena turned the ignition, Michael saw in the rearview mirror a black SUV, no visible plates, turned on its headlights and started following them. "Elena," Michael said calmly, "don't look back, but there's a car following us." Sophie looked in the side mirror. "Dad, they're accelerating." Elena floored it. The Civic shot down Sunset Boulevard. The SUV accelerated too, gluing itself to their rear bumper. "They're going to hit us," Sophie screamed. Elena made a sharp left turn onto a residential street. The SUV followed effortlessly. Michael grabbed his phone, dialing 911. But before he could speak, the SUV slammed violently into the Civic's rear. Elena's car skidded, jumped the curb, nearly hit a lamppost. Elena managed to regain control, but the SUV was coming again. "Turn right," Michael shouted. "Get onto Santa Monica Boulevard," Elena obeyed. The avenue was wider, with more traffic. The SUV fell back momentarily, but then it appeared again, now alongside them, trying to force them off the road. Sophie was calling the police, screaming into the phone, giving their location. Michael looked ahead and saw salvation. An LAPD patrol car stopped on the shoulder. "Honk! Honk now," he shouted. Elena honked frantically. The patrol car turned on its lights, started moving. The SUV, noticing the police presence, braked hard, made an illegal U-turn, and disappeared down a side street. The patrol car followed the Civic to a gas station where they finally stopped. Elena was shaking so badly she could barely hold the steering wheel. Sophie was crying. Michael got out of the car, went to the officers, quickly explained everything. One of the cops, a sergeant in his 50s, listened carefully. "Sir, you need to file this officially. And you need protection." "I know," Michael said, "but I don't trust local PD for this." "I need to talk to the FBI." The sergeant nodded. "I'll escort you to the federal building." "Let's go now." They spent the night at the FBI's Los Angeles field office downtown. An agent named Marcus Reed, a man with a sharp gaze and measured voice, listened to everything. Analyzed the flash drive Carla had given them. Asked Sophie to show all the research she'd done. At 6 a.m, he looked at the three of them and said, "You just handed me enough material to open an operation against one of the largest healthcare corporations in America. But you've also put me in a difficult position, because if this leaks now, the evidence disappears, witnesses vanish, and you three become permanent targets." Michael nodded. "What do you suggest?" "That you stay in protective custody while we build the case. I'll put you in a safe house. Armed team. Nobody knows the location. And in 1 week, we execute." Elena looked at Michael. "Do you trust him?" Michael studied the agent's face. Saw exhaustion, determination, contained rage. He knew that expression. It belonged to someone who'd seen too much injustice. "Yes," Michael said. "I trust him." The safe house was in Pasadena, a quiet residential neighborhood. It was a single-story house with reinforced bars, cameras at every angle, and 4 armed federal agents working shifts. For Michael, it was surreal being there. Him, a maintenance tech, hidden under federal protection, alongside a brilliant doctor and his own daughter, waiting for the FBI to dismantle a billion-dollar conspiracy. But it was real. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized this was the moment his entire life had been preparing him for. All the humiliations, all the lonely nights in the tiny apartment, all the silence, everything had led him here. During that week, Michael, Elena, and Sophie went over every detail with the federal investigators. They organized timelines, identified executives, lobbyists, politicians involved, discovered the scheme went far beyond Elena, dozens of other doctors, and researchers who de-reported BioVitali's irregularities had been systematically destroyed over the years. And then, on the morning of the 6th day, Agent Reed arrived at the house with a discreet smile. "It's done," he said. "Tomorrow morning, we execute Operation Oath. 23 arrest warrants. 15 search warrants. We're getting them all." Operation Oath was executed at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. FBI teams simultaneously served warrants in Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, and Sacramento. Henry Sanders was arrested at his penthouse in Beverly Hills, still in his pajamas. Ryan Mills was arrested at Prism Capital's offices. BioVitale's executives were handcuffed in their marble and glass boardrooms. The footage played on every news channel. The scandal rocked the nation. And when the press asked for clarification, Agent Reed gave a press conference and publicly acknowledged this operation was only possible because of the courage of 3 ordinary people who refused to accept injustice. Dr. Elena Torres, who never gave up proving her innocence. Sophie Reeves, who tracked dirty money with exemplary journalistic skill. And Michael Anthony Reeves, a man who, despite being destroyed by this same corrupt system, years ago found the strength to face it again and win. 3 months later, the charges against Elena were formally dismissed by the State Medical Board of California with an official apology. She was reinstated at Riverside Medical Center, where she received a standing ovation from colleagues. But she didn't return to the same position. She created, with support from several medical institutions, the Healthcare Transparency Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting healthcare professionals who report corporate irregularities. The foundation offered free legal support, protection, and a network of doctors and lawyers committed to ethics. And the first attorney hired by the foundation was Michael Reeves. Michael returned to practicing law, but now with a different purpose. He and Sophie, who left journalism to attend law school, opened a small but respected firm, Reeves & Reeves Law, Civil Rights and Social Justice. The office was in a modest downtown building with 2 rooms, a reception area, and a discreet sign on the door. But within months, it became a national reference for whistleblower cases against powerful corporations. And Michael never forgot where he came from. Every Friday, he stopped by Riverside Medical Center, not as a lawyer, as a volunteer. He helped with maintenance, talked with the techs, reminded himself that dignity isn't in the title, but in character. On a Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the operation, Michael and Elena sat on a bench at Echo Park Lake, the same place where Carla had given them the flash drive. The sun was setting, painting the water gold. "Have you ever thought," Elena said quietly, "that if you hadn't kept that state bar card, none of this would have happened?" Michael smiled. "I think about it every day. Why did you keep it?" He was silent for a moment, looking at the horizon. "Because deep down, I always knew I'd need to be a lawyer again someday. Not for rich clients, not for money. But for someone like you? Someone who deserved justice and had no one to fight for them." Elena took his hand. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. Thank you," Michael replied. "For reminding me I still had something to offer." They sat there in silence as the sun disappeared behind the buildings. 2 survivors, 2 fighters. 2 people who refused to accept that the system had the final word. And in that silence, there was peace. Because they knew they'd done the right thing. And they'd do it again, as many times as necessary. You know what this story teaches us? That the system can be manipulated, corrupted, used as a weapon. But it can also be turned against the powerful when there's courage, evidence, and people willing to risk everything for truth. Michael Reeves could have stayed quiet, could have remained invisible. But he chose to stand up. And in doing so, he didn't just change Elena's life. He changed his own, reclaimed his dignity, rediscovered his purpose. Now I'm asking you, if you were in his position, would you have the courage to face an entire system? To risk your safety to defend someone? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that courage still defeats injustice. Because the world changes when ordinary people decide to do extraordinary things.